We live in a world where telling the truth is very unpopular. It can get you into a lot of trouble, and it's something that a lot of people don't want to hear. But the truth is, when I was young, in my teens, and really my teens, probably started when I was about 15, I used to walk around my hometown in Yorkshire, and I used to look at the people, and I observed all the intellectual and physical ineptitude and all the moral cowardice around me, and the general low caliber of character exhibited by the people in my hometown. And I looked around and I viewed these people with contempt, even at 15. And not only that, I felt superior. I experienced a feeling of superiority at a very young age, and that's not a popular thing to admit. We're supposed to be modest and self-deprecating. It's part of our culture in this country. Not that we have much culture left. But traditionally, an English gentleman would be self-deprecating and modest. Not boastful, not arrogant, not cocky. That's American. It's more American. And it might be something that you expect to see from someone like Donald Trump or Conor McGregor, Kanye West, these types of characters. Not to say anything bad against these people, but none of them are English gentlemen. Nevertheless, that's the truth, and that's how I felt about people. And as I got older, I thought, is that really fair? Should I really scorn these people? Am I really superior, or is this some kind of a complex? For as long as I can remember, I've believed in some form of meritocracy. And the reason for that is because I think it's fair. Some people are superior purely on a genetic basis. They haven't earned their superiority in height, in sporting ability, in IQ, in looks to a degree, although I think that's a mostly nurture thing over nature. But certainly genetics play a role, especially if your genetics are healthy and your epigenetic expression is a healthy one. That's going to make a huge difference. But some people are just morally superior in that they take the decision to take action in the world that pursues virtue. And there's a debate about what virtue is. What does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be virtuous? But there are two ways, therefore, in which I think some people are superior to others. The man who takes the tough decision to do the right thing, regardless of how difficult it is superior to the man who, when faced with the same decision that's just as difficult to take, decides not to take it and doesn't do the right thing. The man or woman who trains harder and longer, with more discipline and more commitment and more courage sometimes, depending on what it is you're doing. They deserve better outcomes, in my opinion. They deserve the rewards of their hard work. I think this is one of the fundamental differences between people on the right and people on the left, broadly speaking. Although the terms right and left are pretty meaningless these days. But the people who believe in meritocracy, and if you could say perhaps a natural hierarchy, a natural order, and the people who believe in total equality, I think I now understand, and have for a few years now, the fundamental difference in worldview between these two camps, what separates them. And it's this. The camp I'm a part of, the camp that believes in meritocracy, a natural hierarchy, and that some people are quite simply better than others, fundamentally believes in free will. We believe, or I believe, and I think many people fundamentally believe, although not consciously, that we have the power to decide what we do. And when you have the power to decide, you can choose between good and bad, wrong and right, virtue and vice, provided you have some kind of moral framework to determine what those things are. But actually, I don't even think you need one, because all human beings inherently know what's wrong and what's not, to a degree. That's why we have emotions like guilt, shame, remorse. Those emotions serve as reminders that we've done something we shouldn't have done. And then we get the opposite, pride. Joy and self-esteem, maybe even happiness, as the rewards for correct action. The people on the left, the socialists, the communists, the Marxists, the egalitarians, they don't think people have a choice. They think that everyone is just a product of their environment. And that people aren't accountable for their own wrongdoing, because they think they're devoid of free will. Like animals in a zoo, just responding to their environment with no higher consciousness. I don't believe that. I think we can choose. I think we have independent minds. I think we have volitional consciousness. And we decide what we're going to do in the world. And therefore, we have to own our own decisions. We have to take responsibility for what we've decided to do. And that's difficult. And I think people in the communist, socialist, Marxist camp, whatever you want to call it, the egalitarians, maybe there's an element of they don't feel that they should be held accountable for what they've done. It's never their fault, you see. They're perpetual victims. They didn't choose this. Which is why, of course, we live in a world of identity politics, where you aren't who you really are, but rather you are simply pigeonholed by whatever sex or race you belong to. Those are the characteristics which really explain your success or failure in the world. Not free will, not your own decisions. When I was young, I decided to do difficult things. I don't know why I decided to do it, probably emotional reasons. Maybe instinctively I knew that hardship was just part of being a man, And so I embraced it. And I did this from a very young age. I remember being at school and being about 13, maybe even 12, very early on in secondary school, and voluntarily exposing myself to enormous amounts of discomfort. I don't know how many people have that natural inclination, but I always did. And I still do to this day. It might be because I fundamentally accept nature and reality. I know that it's tough. Maybe I didn't consciously know, but I instinctively knew that men should be tough. And you can't become tough without experiencing some form of difficulty. We stress the mind and the intellect, and that expands. We stress the body physically, and it grows stronger. They say that diamonds are created under pressure. I think it's the same with human beings. We need to suffer, particularly as men. I can't really speak for women. I'm not a woman, and I don't know what it's like to be a woman. My sense is it's different for women. But for men, I believe men need to suffer. Now, some suffer more than others. Some suffer involuntarily. Very often, some form of suffering I actually think makes people much more interesting. I would, before I got into the shower when I was about, again, 13, I would make sure I'd completed 3 sets of push-ups, 3 sets of pull-ups, and 3 sets of sit-ups. And I would purposefully go to the showering room, shower block in the boarding house of the school I was in, when no one else was there, so I could be alone and do my training. And I used to push my body to failure at that age. I used to go out running in the cold at that age. Get cold on purpose. It helped that I was in the perfect environment for that kind of thing. The school I was at was quite tough. It was a naval school, and we did a lot of things that kids in normal schools wouldn't be expected to do. A lot of marching in all weathers, games, which was rugby in the winter, and then in spring it would be football, I think, hockey, and then we used to do athletics and cricket in the summer. But it was pretty much mandatory early on, and in all weathers, and we would do ceremonial parade as well, once a week or once a fortnight, on a Sunday. Again, it was very, very seldom called off. There was lots of marching, lots of discipline, lots of pretty cruel punishments that wouldn't be allowed today, even though it's not that long ago that I was at school. So it was a good environment to expose children to a certain amount of suffering. And it was just a tough environment generally. The expectations were pretty high academically compared to what most people have in their schools. So I'm very thankful for that. But people that don't experience hardship involuntarily, and who then also do not voluntarily expose themselves to some form of difficulty, some form of suffering, I think are destined to become weak men. And weak men give rise to terrible societies. And I think we are living in a society now that is so terrible, and it's only got this way because of weak men. I view weakness as a form of ugliness. I think it's unnatural and something that we should not aspire to be. Weak, that is. Some people can accept the harsh realities of life. And others can't. But they are realities. And if we don't accept them, they don't go away. So you might as well embrace them. Godspeed.